I've heard urban legends about alligators living in sewers, but a group of Viking goblins? Now that really tips the scales on the weird shit-o-meter. Greetings, my friends. It's time to go on another adventure and another great episode of Goblin Slayer. If you were disappointed that the last episode didn't have any goblin slaughtering, well, guess what? You're gonna love this episode, as it features, without a doubt, the most goblin slaughter that we've actually seen from the franchise thus far, and it probably features the best action that I've seen from the series. It was also a great showcase for Goblin Slayer working with his team. Not just the priestess, but the high elf archer, the lizard priest, and the shaman dwarf. I expected this episode to delve a little bit deeper into the actual lore of this world, and we actually do get a little bit of that. In fact, the opening scene of the episode seems like it takes place in an entirely different anime series, where we get to see these people who work under the Lord, the Demon of Darkness himself, which is this giant skeleton and all of his warriors as they're preparing to kill this young girl, when suddenly these super happy anime-infused warriors show up to save the day. It's implied that this is the group that the Sword Maiden was a part of, but when you actually see her, you can almost see as if she's kind of different when compared to these young, plucky warriors. It is worth mentioning that while the Sword Maiden does have a big reputation, it's not really up to her to do the small jobs like killing goblins, and unfortunately her city is currently being ransacked by them. They're all actually living in the sewer system, and the military's too busy going to war with the Demon King, so it's up to Goblin Slayer and his team to take them down. And that's pretty much the bulk of the entire episode, but I will say it was entertaining as all hell. Like I said, the action in this episode was definitely the best material I've seen from the series. One, it got a little speedier, there was a little bit more punch behind some of the attacks, and watching them all sort of play off each other and utilize their unique abilities really shows that they are a great team and made for this job. A couple of highlights from this episode include a battle against a group of goblins on a boat in the sewers. Just saying that out loud makes me realize how insane it is, but it leads to a great moment where both Goblin Slayer and the Lizard Priest jump on top of the ship, practically capsizing it with their massive strength, and just cutting through all of these guys like a hot knife through butter. High Elf Archer gets to pick them off from afar, Priestess is able to protect everyone with her shield, and the Dwarf Shaman reveals that he has the ability to summon a massive destructive boulder, which he uses to completely crush this ship. However, one of the best things about Goblin Slayer is that it actually doesn't take itself too seriously. It actually does manage to have fun. This is when we get the reveal of the Swamp Dragon, which is essentially just a giant albino alligator which lives in the sewers, and it pursues Goblin Slayer and his team, but they're actually able to utilize it to their advantage to take out the remaining goblins. In fact, Priestess is able to use one of her abilities to have this little light glow on its tail, which gets the attention of the goblins, and then proceeds to absolutely destroy these guys. Its over-the-top violence is only matched by its ability to get incredibly insane and hilarious watching these cartoonish goblins get devoured by a giant alligator. It's, like I said, just a guilty pleasure kind of thing, but it really made this episode incredibly entertaining. However, it looks like this is going to be the beginning of an ongoing arc for the series. The reason why these goblins are here, why they're so smart, how they're learning to actually use boats and tools and weapons, it's as if someone is actually manufacturing them in the city. It is implied at the very end that it could be this one giant big goblin or ogre, or maybe it's someone else who's actually controlling them. Maybe it's the Sword Maiden herself. Why would she be doing that? Who would be even wanting to do this in the first place? Inquiring minds want to know. What I will say, it's pretty interesting that it is implied throughout this episode that there's this bigger story going on in the world of Goblin Slayer, a giant war between good and evil, and yet they're focusing on what is essentially a story about a group of exterminators, and still managing to make it incredibly epic. I don't know how it's doing it, but Goblin Slayer, you're kicking ass. So what's the rundown on this episode of Goblin Slayer? Like I said, I think the action is what truly sold this episode right here. That, and of course, just watching these characters simply just interact with one another. The way they play off each other is great. There's a lot of room for humor, which is wedged perfectly in this sandwich of fantasy dark violence. I really loved the scene when they were running away from the giant alligator monster, where the Lizard Priest actually had to pick up the Dwarf Shaman, and then Goblin Slayer had to pick up up priestess just so that they could actually run away from these things. I also thought it was great that the high elf archer actually proposed that they just feed the dwarf to the giant alligator. And at first it almost seemed like Goblin Slayer was totally going to go along with that plan, but it ended up being another twist with the priestess using her magic. Like I said, seeing these characters in combination with their unique abilities playing off each other as they almost seem to get enjoyment out of taking these things out is one of the big highlights of this episode. That and just the overall absurdity of seeing a group of Viking goblins going down a giant shit river. It's just crazy in the best way possible, but you can see that they're actually building to something a little bit bigger here. I also love how it seems like the general arc of the story is going to be one episode is going to focus on Goblin Slayer taking out some goblins, and the next he's going to go join the group on a much bigger adventure. I also thought that it was kind of funny how High Elf Archer and Priestess didn't want Goblin Slayer to use some of his more violent tactics, such as using poison or fire, or even what I thought was maybe the funniest line of the entire episode where High Elf Archer said, "Could you not waterboard the goblins?" It's moments like this that make me realize this show is practically a comedy, but like the rest of the series, it's entertaining as hell. It's not the best anime series in the world. The production value is good in some areas and bad in others, but for the most part, kick up your feet, get yourself some popcorn and a couple of beers, and relax with Goblin Slayer. It's a very fun, dark fantasy experience, and this was another great episode which I think was giving us the best highlights of what this entire series is all about. So I'm giving this one a 4 out of 5. You guys need to check it out. If any of you did watch the episode, tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Thank you all for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.